Accents are a bit like passports. Very quickly, they reveal a lot about us. They pay homage to our cultural background and to the beautiful and diverse world that we live in. Accents add a distinct flair to our language, and the world would indeed be a very boring place if we all sounded alike. However, if accents become a barrier to communication, to people understanding each other, then it is problematic for everyone involved. Hello, language lovers and language learners and intellectually curious people everywhere. My name is Bakul Soman and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking all about accents. Specifically, we're going to review 5 elements that comprise an accent. One or more of these elements are at play when you're hearing an accent or when you're speaking with an accent. Let's make sure we get something straight right off the bat. We all have an accent. Whether you're a native speaker or a non-native speaker, that means yes, you have an accent. And the reason for this is really simple. An accent is essentially the product of specific speech sound production and the way in which those speech sounds are put together. And of course, we all do that every time we speak, hence we all have an accent. Typically, when we talk about so-and-so has an accent or so-and-so has a thick accent, what we mean is that person's accent is different from the standard, the typical accent of the native speakers from around here. So we're talking about a non-standard accent. Years ago, we had a neighbor who was from the bayous in Louisiana. He was a wonderful man, but talking to him was really challenging because I couldn't understand most of what he said. It was embarrassing to keep asking him to repeat himself, and I can only imagine how frustrating it must have been for him to not be understood when he spoke. It was just such an uncomfortable situation to be in. I bet something similar has happened to you at least once in your life. You encounter someone who's from a different part of the country or a different part of the world and has an accent that you're not really familiar with and you're really struggling to figure out what's being said. Or maybe you've been that person who has the heavy accent and other people have trouble understanding you. And you're trying to figure out exactly why and what to do about it. Okay, so let's get started with the first of 5 elements that you might be hearing when you hear an accent or when you speak with an accent. Specific sound production. Each language has its own phonetic inventory. That is essentially all the sounds that are allowed and used in a given language. English has 44 phonemes. As you can tell, it's not the same as the written alphabet because English has 26 written alphabet but 44 phonemes. So phonemes are the sounds that we use. English doesn't really have a lot of sounds that are unusual, that are not present in other languages, but there are a few that are tricky. The first one, it's actually a pair of sounds, is the TH sound. And there are 2 versions of this sound. There is a voiced version, so that would be the first sound in the word this or that. And the second version is an unvoiced version, and that would be the first sound in a word like thanks. So you're doing the same thing with your articulators, but you're turning your voice off for th and you're turning it on for the. Only 8% of the world's languages have this sound in it. So if somebody whose primary language doesn't have this sound, when they speak English, that could be a sound that they have trouble with. Another sound that's tricky is the w sound, which is represented in English by the letter W. A lot of languages don't have that sound. They might have the letter, but they don't have the sound. For example, in German, they have the letter V and W, but V makes the f sound and W makes the v sound. So they don't have the w sound, even though they have the letter. Similarly, in a lot of Indian languages, there isn't a distinction between a V and a W. There are not 2 distinct sounds. A lot of Indian languages have a letter that is represented by that character, w, w. It's kind of in between a V and a W. So Germans and a lot of people who speak Indian languages can have trouble distinguishing or maintaining that distinction between v and w. So for them, a sentence like this will be very tricky. Vivian's vibrant voice wove whimsical words while viewing the vast valley with wildflowers waving in the warm wind. Element number 2 that might be in play: sound combinations and position. So each language has a phonetic inventory, and all the words in that language are essentially made by combining those sounds in different ways. Each language has its own set of rules around what sounds can be combined and where they can occur in a given word. In English, there are a lot of S blends that are allowed. For example, we can have S blends are essentially clusters with 2 or more consonants, right? So you can have a consonant blend that is 2 consonants together, like st, like stop. SL, ST, SP, SW, all of those are allowed. SD, SG are not allowed. In Spanish, a lot of the same clusters are allowed, but they are not allowed at the beginning of a word. So in English, you can have a word that starts with an S blend, like spoon. Okay? This is allowed. A blend, an S blend at the beginning of a word is allowed. In Spanish, it is not allowed. So if Spanish speakers are trying to say the word spoon, they may say es spoon, because they're trying to follow the rules of their language, where S blends are not allowed at the beginning. So they add this vowel sound before the blend, because otherwise it doesn't sound right to their ears. Element number 3, syllable stress. In English, when we have a multisyllabic word, we don't treat each syllable the same. We stress one of those syllables, or sometimes more than one syllable, but each syllable doesn't get the same treatment. Let's quickly review. A word like cat or school or house or dog all have one syllable. Words like pillow, motorcycle, organization have more than one syllable. For one syllable words, you don't have to worry, right? For multisyllabic words, where do we put the emphasis? Okay, so let's take a word like pillow. In this word, we stress the first syllable, pillow. Let's take a word like motorcycle. 4 syllables. We stress the first syllable and then a little bit of stress on the third syllable. Motorcycle. Not all languages use this stress pattern. For example, French, Italian, Spanish, a lot of Indian languages use different stress patterns. So when speakers of those languages speak English, they may transpose stress patterns from their primary language onto English, and that could be another reason why they sound different. The 4th element that could be at play is rhythm. And what I mean by that is it does relate to stress patterns again, but not within a word, but within an utterance. So from the beginning of your utterance to the end, what are you doing with stress? How are you distributing your stress across the utterance? English is a stress-timed language. That means not every syllable gets stressed the same amount. When we speak in English, it's almost like Morse code. In fact, that's exactly how it was described by a Welsh phonetician. His name was Alfred Lloyd James, and he said English sounds like Morse code because Morse code has a pattern of dots and dashes. So the dots would be the words that don't get a lot of stress, and dashes would be the words or parts that get more stress. Let's take a look at an example. I want to go to the store. Each of those is a 1-syllable word, okay? When we say that word, we don't treat each syllable the same. In fact, when we say that sentence, this is what we say. I want to go to the store. I want to go to the store. Okay? So what we're doing is we're connecting the I and wanna, and we're really stressing the wanna. I wanna go to the, so you really just like jumble that up together and go through it really, really fast. I wanna go to the store. So those are the 2 places where you stress, and the rest you kind of gloss over. So these are your dashes. So it's dash, dot, 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 dash. Okay? So that Morse code pattern, English has that. A lot of other languages don't, like French, Spanish, Italian. A lot of Indian languages don't have that stress pattern. So speakers from those languages, when they speak English, could transpose a different stress pattern onto English, which completely changes the rhythm of their speech. The last item that we're going to talk about is intonation. Intonation refers to the pitch contours of a given utterance. What you're doing with your pitch. Are you raising it? Are you lowering it? How does the pitch vary over the length of the utterance? Okay. Again, different languages have different intonation patterns. English has 3, and we're going to quickly review just a brief overview today. The first pattern is a falling intonation. So if you listen to a sentence like, he is going to school, listen carefully, this is what's going on. He is going to school. It dips at the end. He is going to school. That's a falling intonation. Rising intonation, listen to a sentence like, do you like cookies? Do you like cookies? Rises at the end. That's a rising intonation. And there are some contexts or some types of sentences in which we use a fall-rise intonation or a rise-fall intonation. So listen to a sentence like, we need to buy milk, juice, eggs, and fruit. Okay, this is what's going on. We need to buy, pretty steady, milk, juice, eggs, and fruit. There are rules around which intonation pattern is to be used in what kinds of sentences, but again, we'll review that in a later video. Today, what we've done is we have quickly reviewed 5 elements that could be at play if you hear an accent or if you speak with an accent that is non-standard. We talked about specific speech sound production. We talked about sound combinations and word position. We talked about syllable stress. We talked about rhythm, which is the stress pattern over an utterance or over a sentence. And we talked about intonation, which is the pitch contour of a given sentence. So now you should be able to listen with new ears. We have peeled back a lot of layers to reveal things that were hiding in plain sight. You should now be able to hear exactly what's going on when you're speaking or when you hear somebody else speaking and they sound different. Over subsequent videos, we're going to take a deep dive into each of these 5 elements. We'll talk about each one in a lot more detail. We'll go through a lot of examples together so that you can really understand what's going on with each element. And you can determine if you have an accent, which of these is an area that you would like to work on if you want to modulate your accent. So make sure you tune back in. As always, thank you for watching and see you next time.